for the wrong to rule. The good must just stand idly by.
Happy New Week, clown welders. I hope you're all doing well as the world goes more and more wonky day by day. Yesterday, the Prince and Princess of Wales decided to get involved in the Israel-Palestine conflict. Strange thing to do, but they did it. And there was much mockery and requests that they followed in William's grandmother's footsteps, which was to serve her people brilliantly and keep her nose out of politics, which she pretty much managed to do, except for the vaccine, but we all make mistakes. They released a statement saying, "I remain deeply concerned about the terrible human cost of the conflict in the Middle East since the Hamas terrorist attack on 7th of October. Too many have been killed." Yeah, I just want to stop there and say, I don't really see it as a Hamas terrorist attack, the 7th of October. I sort of see it as a declaration of war. If you go into someone else's country and start killing their innocent women and children, I just see that as a declaration of war. But never mind, let's go on. I, like many others, want to see an end to the fighting as soon as possible. I think everyone agrees with that one. I wonder what you could do to get the fighting to stop. Possibly release hostages. Oh well. There is a desperate need for increased humanitarian support in Gaza. It's critical that aid gets in and the hostages are released. Cheapers, Loza. So good. He said that he wants hostages released, but he's focusing mainly on Gaza. Sometimes it's only when faced with the sheer scale of human suffering that the importance of permanent peace is brought home. There'll never be permanent peace on this planet while human beings exist on it, because human beings, a lot of them, aren't very pleasant, as we have seen throughout the world. We'll get on to a particularly unpleasant human being in a minute, Abdul, who they found. Yippee. Even in the darkest hour, we must not succumb to the counsel of despair. I continue to cling to the hope that a brighter future can be found, and I will refuse to give up on that. Well, thanks, William. I'm sure that's going to make a huge difference, along with the debating in Parliament today that they're doing, calling for a ceasefire that no one's going to listen to in a war that has absolutely nothing to do with Britain. And the outside of Parliament is people calling for a ceasefire when, we've got other problems. You'd possibly consider that Parliament might be debating our nuclear deterrent, but we'll get on to that as well. Anyway, much mockery and ridicule followed Prince and Princess of Wales, because it's probably just better to stay out of politics if you're a royal and focus on serving your people. My favourite response to the news that Abdul, the acid attacker or corrosive substance killer or maimer, has been found was a touching tribute from Burnside, who mimicked Prince William and Catherine's message in support of virtue signalling in support of Gaza, and said, "Catherine and I were deeply saddened to learn of the death of Abdul Adizi, a father, a Christian, a chemist, and a proud Geordie. His death by drowning is a warning to us all of the dangers of rising sea levels." You see, that's he's just pointing out the utter absurdity of all of this. This man shouldn't have been in the country in the first place, Abdul, and much as no one wants to see anyone die, I suppose if someone is going to die or take their own life, doing so for permanently maiming women and children would probably justify that. But the fact that it happened in the first place and that Britain and London is the acid attack capital of Europe, as it is now, is terrifying and should horrify us all. The country is changing at speeds that none of us will ever really begin to comprehend, probably until it's too late. What was interesting, though, is, so while we've got the Palestinian flags outside of Parliament and they're debating the motion to call for yet another ceasefire, I often used to joke about Britain's nuclear deterrent, because I thought we got these really old submarines, and I bet you if the time came and we had to press the red button to get rid of evil Vladimir Putin, that it wouldn't work. So apparently off the coast, somewhere off the coast of America, I think, if I get this right, they were going to fire a Trident nuclear missile without a warhead on it, thankfully, over to sort of off the west coast of Africa, 6,000-mile trip. You know, the wonderful nuclear deterrent. Didn't work, apparently. As the BBC reported it, the missile went up a little bit and then plopped into the water, which I thought was rather a canny and apposite metaphor for the whole of our country. Things are not what they seem. So instead of debating why we don't have a nuclear deterrent, a functional nuclear deterrent at the moment, especially while the whole world is geeing themselves up for war with the evil man in Russia, Britain is again a laughingstock. Perhaps they should focus on missile maintenance instead of painting the thing with a progressive pride flag in the hope that that would make it a more inclusive Armageddon creating device. Or perhaps indeed, as I said earlier, the missile didn't identify as a missile. It was a non-binary missile or a non-nuclear missile. Who knows? Anyway, it's embarrassing. Then I'm watching TV last night and I catch Tucker Carlson, who it's fascinating to see how everyone has turned on Tucker. It's really interesting to see how everyone's turned on Tucker. You think, why do people turn on anybody? But anyway, they all right-thinking good people have decided to turn on Tucker Carlson because he interviewed Vladimir Putin. And then he made a series of videos afterwards pointing out that Russia may not be the most dreadful place on earth to live. But, you know, I don't know enough. So Tucker, in my view, Tucker's got every right to talk about whatever he wants to, you know, being a free speech person. Anyway, I listened to the interview with Vladimir Putin and Tucker Carlson, and Putin was pretty, you know, he was, well, not evasive, but he didn't really pick on individuals at any point during the whole thing, except Boris Johnson, who he singled out for particular criticism for scuppering a peace deal in Ukraine. Putin's view was that that was at the behest of the Americans. Anyway, Tucker then goes on television with The Blaze, Glenn Beck, on The Blaze, and says that he approached Boris Johnson for an interview following what Vlad had said, and Boris's team apparently requested 1 million quid for this. Now, Boris denies this, but let's just work this one through. If it is true that Boris Johnson scuppered a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, that is in Britain's national interest. He has absolutely, and the public interest, to know exactly what went on. It's not for him to say, I will charge 1 million quid to tell you how I did or didn't affect the course of world peace or our steady march towards World War III, which is what it all feels like. Now, Boris is backtracking and saying, oh no, I was going to donate it to some Ukrainian children or something like that. But just think about it. The idea that someone could say, I need 1 million quid to tell you a piece of information that you should have had for free and should have also known by now. So the idea that Boris coming back to lead the Tories out of the absolute disaster that they're going through, we'll get onto that as well, I find to any normal thinking person insane. And I don't know why it's not a bigger deal, but you know, it's like excess deaths, you know, a couple of jumbo jets crashing a week, equivalent of extra bodies, and no, we don't need to talk about that. We just invent a new model, and the new model is different from the old model. The new model says there aren't any excess deaths. Actually, we really got excess deaths wrong, and everyone's fine. And young men aren't dying of heart-related problems, so that's absolutely fine. Anyway, last thing I wanted to talk about was the by-election results last week. Now, I understand that the turnouts in by-elections are lower. So in Wellingborough, it was 38%, which shows some pretty severe voter apathy. And you know, last time in 2019, it was about 68%. And I understand that less people turn out for that. But what we've seen is what I think the take on this is that you couldn't have had a better campaigner in Ben Habib. I mean, what an amazing guy. He spent all this time up there. He really knows his stuff and he's fantastic. And he's sending out, you know, a better message than the Tories are. But what we saw was not a massive swing over to Labour. So it doesn't look like people really want the Labour Party either. Mainly it seems apathy. But the 20,000 missing Conservatives who just didn't even bother to turn up. So then I'm trying to ask myself why. And I wonder if it is what I've been sort of talking about, which is there is like a club in this country that you get invited into. And the admission to the club would mean that you would have to ditch a few of the more, punchy policies that people really take on board. The decimation of our culture, the immigration issue, the complete transformation of our nation, and all of these sorts of things. And it's just sort of ignored. And this one in, one out reform policy doesn't seem to have landed at the door. So actually, whilst it's great to see Ben get 13, I think, % of the vote, and Rupert to get, I think, 10, did he? It's great. I was actually surprised because I was hoping and expecting for them to get a lot more. I'm sure that they will say that this is a victory for reform, and it's put them very firmly on the map, and probably it has, but has it put them very firmly on a map as a insurgent party who are really willing to take the hard issues to the voting public, or are they just part of a cosy establishment club who won't talk about the issues that people really care about in this country, which I speak about at length? And what will happen with those 20,000 Tories who just didn't bother turning up to vote come the general election? It will be fascinating, but it does look like the Tories are in real trouble. And if they stay at home and we get an enormous Labour majority, what are the public going to do when they sit and go, Labour have got, the Tories are down to 150 seats or something? I mean, that would be terrible. Labour won't need any support from anyone else to bring in the legislation they want to bring in, which will be the final death knell to our country, which I've mentioned before, the Race Equality Act, which has the subjective version of Islamophobia in it, where, if you perceive yourself to have been Islamophobed, then you have been. I'm actually really massively worried and concerned by the subjectivity of law. There must be an objective standard in law. The minute you put any subjective standard into law, then law becomes a political weapon rather than a defence of truth. So what else? This week we are sat down going through the Department for Education case. The pre-action letter has gone out, so we'll wait to see whether they ignore that. And then we'll be making an announcement in the first week of March. Moving forward, I'm staring at Sadiq Khan's renaming of these railway lines. I mean, the man. It's like, this is the problem with the mayor. Why do we have one? First and foremost, 450 quid of your money, well, not your money, but Londoners' money, £450 of everybody goes to Sadiq every year. That's 450 quid. That's quite a substantial Christmas shopping list. That's amazing. 450 quid for what? For a guy to sit there and spend 6 million quid renaming some tube lines. I mean, overground lines. It's like London under this mayor, and I think it would probably be true under any mayor, but particularly under the tin pot dictator that is Sadiq Khan. He's just turned London into like a playground for his own crazy ideology. And to call a line the Lioness line or the Windrush line, and to refuse, this is the bit that gets me. So to refuse to put a statue of Her Late Majesty, who served this country, literally had to bite her tongue while she was wheeled around to open charity after charity and congratulate people and listen to school children and listen to people, and to really, she just gave her life to it. To say, no, sorry, Sadiq doesn't think that that's worthy of a statue on the 4th plinth in Trafalgar Square, which he uses to mock Londoners relentlessly. We had the meringue with flies on it, which I don't know, I haven't been past it recently, but I don't know if it's there. So no statue of the Queen on the 4th plinth, which would seem to be a fitting tribute to our most wonderful and effective monarch. Instead, Sadiq's going to put a monument with 750, I think. I didn't get too into it because I ripped up the piece of paper and threw it out the window, of some like plaster casts of some trans people's faces arranged as a sculpture. That's how godless, secular wokeism is doing to our city. I was surprised he didn't call it the diversity line or anything. Anyway, it's just another example of our culture being eroded and destroyed and taken away. And I hope that I'm thinking about what to do in regards to the mayoralty, because I can't stand what he's doing to this city. And I wonder whether the way in is to abolish the whole thing, get rid of the mayor and devolve powers. Who needs the extra layer of political bureaucracy? We could devolve powers back to the boroughs, and then you could possibly have a situation where the boroughs turn around and go, you know what, we don't really want this surveillance state that you've erected outside of our houses so that we can't go to work without having to pay another £12.50 to appease the sun monster. So if you pay the £12.50, no climate change. You don't pay the £12.50, climate change. We all knew that climate change. Oh, and finally, did anyone see that climate change is also racist? Perhaps we can play out on that, Rachel Levine. Admiral Rachel Levine, a man in a dress, telling us that the sun is racist. But hell, that's Clown World for you. See you next week.